All right, and action.
Oh, hey, my brothers and sisters. I'm not exactly sure how I got here, but I think it had something to do with that psychic energy we used to levitate the Pentagon. Like, I was just in the 70s, and now I'm here. What year is it again?
2023.
Oh, yeah, that's far out. But I think you summoned me to talk about the 60s, right, man?
Yes.
Yeah, those were some hip times. I dug it so much. The 50s were boring, the 60s rocked, and the 70s, well, they obviously suck. Maybe the 80s will be radical. You have any 8 tracks for me? I would dig some tunes.
We don't have 8 tracks anymore. Can we get back on topic?
Oh, yeah, sorry. You know, I was like everywhere in the 60s. I know about everything. We would just turn on, tune in, and drop out. So let's get into it, my fellow deadheads. The Vietnam War was met by the public with strong feelings and beliefs. Many people disagreed with the violence and devastation the war had on both the Vietnamese and American home front, as it questioned American morality. It is estimated that over 58,000 American soldiers died in combat, and as a result of the combat in Vietnam, over 2 million Vietnamese civilians were killed. The war was also seen as unsuccessful as communism spread through all of Vietnam. When soldiers returned home from the war, it wasn't uncommon that American citizens would be waiting for them, throwing objects and shouting profanities. This hatred for the war effort was expressed mostly by the youth of America. During this time, the generation of the flower children were known to have open, peaceful protests, and they did not support the war in any way. They were really hip and were into music and art, literature, free love, and drugs. Lots of drugs, and lots of love. Like we say, make love and not war. Oh, I'm getting some dirty looks from my cameraman. I'm gonna get back on topic. One of the ways we spread the bad vibes about the war was through literature. Many American poets and writers, including Robert Bly and David Ray, created a group called the American Writers Against the Vietnam War. This group of writers and poets led rallies, teach-ins, and demonstrated against the war through their collaborative writing. Art was also a major part of the anti-Vietnam counterculture movement. Through art and political cartoons, messages regarding the Vietnam War were easily spread. Vietnam was one of the first publicly televised wars, and families were able to see the tragedies firsthand, and these images evoked fear and dread in these families as their very own boys were being slaughtered in the war. In turn, political cartoons were often aimed to young men and their parents as they depicted the sheer quantity of innocent lives lost due to the draft. Other cartoons were directed towards nativist feelings and depicted Uncle Sam begging for an end to the seemingly untiring war. Art was also used in posters and pamphlets used to advocate for the anti-war effort. The poster, "War is not safe for children and other living things," was an outcry for change in society regarding the Vietnam War, as Americans' children were being slaughtered in this seemingly pointless war. But the embrace of music by the counterculture is really what made the anti-Vietnam War movement so special. From folk to jam bands to rock guitars, we love it all. And we want any excuse to celebrate it. Like I said, folk was generally embraced by artists like Bob Dylan. Jam bands such as the Grateful Dead were so popular. And Jimi Hendrix was worshipped like a god for his shredding electric guitar. But these guys were just like us. Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead was drafted for the war, but originally escaped for possessing copious amounts of weed. Rock on, brother. But he was eventually drafted into the Marines for 18 months before reuniting with the Grateful Dead. Besides writing songs like the U.S. Blues, which protested the American war effort, the band also engaged in the Columbia Sit-In of 1968, where they protested the war, and they also performed at Woodstock. Not that Woodstock, this one. Woodstock was an iconic music festival which spanned 3 days in August of 1969. and over 500,000 people were in attendance. The festival was on Max Yadzgar's farm in Bethel, New York, and besides the iconic music and good vibes, it was kind of a disaster. The town was unable to handle the insanely large crowds and ran out of food, water, bathrooms, and space fairly quickly. Most people never even made it to Woodstock because of the traffic. It was so bad, partially because of the terrible roadways and the cows. One of the most iconic performances at Woodstock was Jimi Hendrix's performance of the Star-Spangled Banner. In his rendition, man, he used special effects, distortion, and his electric guitar to mimic the screaming and bombs of the Vietnam War. In later interviews, after he received heavy backlash for the performance, he said he never meant for it to be disrespectful and only meant to make a statement regarding the nation's violence through excessive use of the Stratocaster tremolo bar. Hendrix in an interview said, "I don't know, man. I'm an American, so I played it. They made me sing it in school, so it was like a flashback. It's not unorthodox. I thought it was beautiful. Rock on, brother." Although the public responded negatively to Jimmy's performance, the festival goers loved it and set a precedence for the anti-Vietnam War movement. On the complete other hand of the spectrum, the Grateful Dead were terrible at Woodstock. Whether it was the faulty sound system, the bad weather, or the sheer amount of drugs they took that night, they were known as the worst band there and weren't even included in the documentary. Later, Jerry Garcia was quoted saying, "It's nice to know you can survive as a band even after blowing the biggest gig of your career." Another iconic performance of Woodstock was Country Joe and the Fish's performance of the Vietnam song. This song was iconic as it was a song directly aimed at the war and got a lot of people fired up about the injustices of the war itself. Damn, Woodstock was great.
You know what, Flower Child? This is great and all, but what does any of this have to do with the current times of 2023?
You know, I'm really glad you asked that. Although the Vietnam War happened almost 50 years ago, there are still debates regarding the morality of the war. Not to mention the counterculture movement permanently altered art, literature, and music as we know it. In attempts to spread awareness for the atrocities that Vietnamese citizens witnessed, a Tony Award-winning musical under the name of Miss Saigon was written. Also, a popular TV show called The Wonder Years was made, and it depicts certain aspects of the 60s and the Vietnam War as a whole. The Vietnam War is also most prevalent still in art, most notably because of the graffiti artist under the pen name of Banksy. Banksy, a British street artist, is most commonly known for pointing out all of society's greatest flaws and turning them into thought-provoking works of art. One of my favorite pieces of work by Banksy is his piece titled "Can't Beat That Feeling." During the Vietnam War, American soldiers ambushed a Vietnamese town using napalm, a gelid gas, on innocent civilians. One of the most famous pictures from this event is titled Napalm Girl and is an image of a naked girl fleeing her hometown as this gas was released on her village. Banksy took the girl and beside her put infamous American figures Ronald McDonald and Mickey Mouse. Although this piece may seem pointless, when looking closer, this piece is meant to challenge American morality in the context of Vietnam. The trademark grins of the mascots counter the girl's frightened expression, in a satirical manner, and the piece is meant to make people question the atrocities of American warfare. As the characters disturbingly wave and smile, they seem undaunted by her distress and lead the girl to her doomed fate. So there, an anti-Vietnam War movement permanently altered American culture when regarding art, literature, and most importantly, music. On that note, let your freak flag fly, my fellow hippies.